Hi and welcome to Innovators. Music genres can be symbiotic. There can be interaction between different groupings or different genres sharing similar DNA or roots, and this can be heard in each style despite being noticeably different in musical content or design. If looking at the early trajectory of house music and techno from the early to mid-80s, we can hear similar influences but perhaps recontextualized or presented differently in their respective forms. We notice it again in strains of these genres, whether UK or European variants as well. Dance music and all its subgenres are not dissimilar to other forms of popular music, such as rock, where it's possible to trace the lineage of styles and sounds throughout certain eras. What is interesting is whether it's possible to then determine a year zero for a particular form of music, and also then identifying the individuals who were there creating these experiments into the musical unknown. The recognised birthplaces of house and techno are Chicago and Detroit. Both cities had clubs and record labels that pioneered their respective sounds. But what of the music that helped shape and define these genres before they were actually genres? Where did that come from? What record, if any, would have the most impact on these genres of house and techno? What was the first full electronic dance album? It's almost impossible to say, however, Innovator number 16 has a very strong case, and could lay claim to both these points. As described by Pitchfork magazine in 2016, if 3 chords form the skeleton of punk, then 2 chords are the soul of techno. In the case of Innovator 16, he took 2 chords and made a landmark album. I'd like to introduce Innovator number 16, Manuel Göttsching. Primarily a guitarist, Manuel Göttsching came to prominence in the German Komisch music krautrock band Ashra Tempel. Ashra Tempel were active from 1970 to 1976, and it was Manuel Göttsching's first prominent musical output. Ashra Tempel featured revolving members, with only Göttsching being the only constant really. Their music was quite psychedelic and atmospheric, featuring both traditional instruments and synthesizers, and they would exert influence on later space rock, krautrock, electronic and ambient music. After several lineup changes, Göttsching decided to record solo and began exploring more use of synthesizers, and in particular sequencers. As Göttsching explains himself in an interview for WeirdoMusicForever.com, I had begun to build my own studio and to work with synthesizers, keyboards and organs. I collected more instruments and built up my studio, recording every day and night. It was a development over the years from 1974 to 1980. I also performed some of the electronic concerts for a friend back then who was doing curious fashion shows which were more like events. I performed live electronic music 3 times at Lowe's for about 80 or 90 minutes each time. So I got used to playing and performing with analog synthesizers, computers and sequencers. These sessions would eventually result in his landmark album E2 to E4 in 1981. In December 1981, having just returned from a tour with his friend Klaus Schulze, Göttsching was alone in his home studio and decided to create an improvised piece as an exercise, and also to give himself a tape to listen to on an up-and-coming trip. Moving between his battery of synthesizers and sequencing devices, he settled on a gentle 2-chord vamp on his Prophet 10, to which he added an array of pinging electronic percussion and simple melodic figures. And over the second half of the piece he laid down an extended guitar solo. Cut live without overdubs in a single hour, E2 to E4 became, upon its eventual release in 1984, an electronic musical landmark. As argued by Tony Naylor in The Guardian newspaper in 2013, in terms of modern dance music's DNA, the hour-long piece that he produced, E2 to E4, is as important as any disco, funk or Kraftwerk record. It should be noted that this album is recorded live with no overdubs. The piece was improvised and entirely in the moment. As Göttsching said in an interview with Chris May in 2017, "When I played it back, I thought, this is okay actually, maybe I should release it." All the technical aspects of the recording were just right too. There was no single fault. He explained further in an interview with Tom Watson in Crack magazine. There were no technical mistakes, no crackling, no breaks. It was all very fluent. There was a basic idea, which was just taking two singular chords and building around those limitations. All the rest is totally improvised. One of the most extraordinary things about E2 to E4 is that it took as long to record as it does to listen to. I never did any overdubs, never edited anything, Göttsching insisted. Just from the beginning to the end, it's like this. It's like a live recording. Everything was in the moment. He listened to his creation over and over, trying to figure out why it worked so well, looking for reasons why it wasn't as good as it could seem. But he was at a loss to know. There were no mistakes, no incomplete ideas. It wasn't too loud, too soft, too derivative. As Pitchfork magazine explained, for one magic hour, the perfectly realised music floats in space, inviting listeners to admire it from the outside and then dance within it. Göttsching approached Virgin Records, however, the label were excited by the album. Göttsching himself began to get second thoughts about it and ended up shelving it. The album was finally released in 1984 on Klaus Schulze's In-Team label. It sold fairly modestly, just a few thousand copies, but one of these copies made its way to the record bag of Larry Levan, who made it a staple of his Paradise Garage sets. Göttsching stated, "When I found out E2 to E4 was being played in clubs, I couldn't imagine people dancing to it. There's not a strong bass drum and the rhythm is very subtle. I took ideas from dance music, but my composing goes more into the minimalist style of Steve Reich and Philip Glass." Göttsching also insisted that he never had any interest in dance music. Techno didn't exist when he recorded E2 to E4. There was a kind of disco music, he recalls, but I didn't want to do anything like that. He was actually amazed by its popularity amongst clubbers. As Mark Richardson in Pitchfork magazine explains further, there are two things to hear in E2 to E4, what the music is and what the ideas within it would become. It's sublime as a present moment listening experience, with beautiful textures and a glorious symmetry. E2 to E4 is like one long pop song stretched over 60 minutes, which is to say it's sort of like its own DJ set. It plays with pop structures, but on a much larger canvas. Göttsching's guitar work highlights one of E2 to E4's most appealing qualities, as Richardson also states, that the music sits precisely at the point where the human meets the machine. The great bulk of the music is synthesized and sequenced, a Rube Goldberg-like device that winds through pre-programmed sections. But when his guitar enters, we hear the touch of a musician brought up playing classical music on nylon strings. The human hand and the circuits also switch roles, though. If the warm tone of the machines can feel almost human, like an invitation, a friendly and welcoming sound perfect for the communion of the dance floor, Göttsching's tightly controlled guitar work sometimes has a mechanical quality, existing in clear relation to the sequencer's grid. Elements of E2 to E4 would appear in other DJ sets and between 1984 and 1989, and it would slowly influence the house and techno productions of the day through its use of sequenced melodic lines. In 1989, Italian house producer Sueno Latino approached Göttsching and reworked the piece of music for the Balearic club scene, and their version became a chart smash in several European countries. It was then remixed by Detroit legend Derek May in 1992, by which point the track became cemented as a club classic. In 1994, Carl Craig released a remix named Remake under his alias of Paperclip People, and later that year the German electronic duo Basic Channel released a Basic Reshape remix of Remake, which would be included on the compilation album BCD under the name of E2-E4 Basic Reshape. LCD Sound System's 4533 recording from 2006 was inspired conceptually by E2 to E4, as indicated by the accompanying artwork and the lengthy duration of the piece. Manuel Göttsching deserves the title of Innovator because with his band Ashra Temple he helped shape German experimental rock in the early 1970s, and then, under his own name, he pioneered electronic dance music in the early 1980s. Along the way, Göttsching has also made major contributions to ambient and minimalist music as well. His importance in the creation of modern dance music in particular is really impossible to overestimate. Tony Naylor states E2 to E4 remains as influential today, its sparse hypnotic repetition echoing through the minimal techno moves of Basic Channel and Ricardo Villalobos, while its proto-Balearic reverie has inspired LCD sound system and cosmic disco producers such as Lindstrom. The Vinyl Factory present the argument that E2 to E4 is to modern electronic dance music what Terry Riley's In C was to minimalism in the mid-1960s, or Brian Eno's Another Green World was to ambient in the mid-1970s. As argued by Robert Barry in The Quietus in 2017, from the mind-bending free psychedelia of Ashrar Temple's self-titled debut to the astonishingly prescient proto-techno of his 1984 solo album, E2 to E4, Göttsching consistently proved himself one of the most daring and innovative musicians in one of the most fertile periods for German music. As guitarist, composer and live electronics pioneer, Göttsching expanded the minds of listeners and the solid palettes available to the many artists he influenced again and again and again. So I ask you to check out E2 to E4 on YouTube, but remember that this composition is 37 years old and really could have easily been composed 10 years later based on the compositional ideas thrown into what is essentially a live improvised session with no edits or overdubs. In one word, amazing. Thanks for watching. See you next time.